Hey everyone! Okay, who's ready to learn about women's suffrage? I sure know I am. I'm absolutely so set. Okay, so basically, women's suffrage was a movement that referred to the voting of women in political campaigns, which one of these was like in the US, like presidents and stuff like that. The fight for this took over like 100 years to actually work out before like women were actually considered true citizens of the country they were in, which mostly this took place in, like I said before, the US and also many places in Europe. So we're gonna mostly talk about today like the leading events of that, who was involved, what it really took to like get this like moving and like fully accepted in society. Okay, so in the early 1820s and 30s, the idea called the cult of womanhood, it was beginning to be like questioned by women that were following it, which was like the cult of womanhood was like the idea of being like the perfect life, like just like listening to their husbands, not like putting themselves out there as much as men would at the time. And at the same time, the Civil War was really picking up, which this did put somewhat of a setback on the women's suffrage movement, because now the rights of men of color were being considered, though at the time women of color weren't being considered. That was also part of, technically, of women's suffrage, but at the time women of color, as I'll mention later, were not really included as much as they probably should have been, because after all, they were a part of the women's suffrage movement by definition. During the movement, they would struggle with, obviously, the Civil War, as I said before, and also the doubt that some women had of, like, what would happen if they put themselves out there this much. Like, what kind of criticism would they receive, and stuff like that, you know? Also, as I said before, many women of color were not included whatsoever and wouldn't be included for a very long time afterwards. Some of the key women that were really, like, a key part of the movement at the time were Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And Susan B. Anthony was one of the co-founders of the Women's Suffrage Association and published a newspaper about women's rights and why they should be fighting for that and like just encouraging women to fight for their rights. And then Elizabeth Cady Stanton was the co-founder of the Women's Suffrage Association with Susan B. Anthony and formulated the first demands for women's votes. So it really was like the start of all this, really. Then, so with the whole movement in general, the outcome was in the 1920s, the 19th Amendment was ratified and women were now allowed to vote, which this mostly started like in the West and then would slowly move to the East, and once again did not include women of color in some places. So the rights of women being able to vote has greatly affected like America as a whole, and we have many like female politicians with the rights of women in mind. And we also have associations for women and marginalized groups, once again, like women in color. And it also has had many effects on religion, because religion back in certain times did put down women, and I mean there are some religions that still do. And with the whole like women now being allowed to vote and being able to like speak differently than their husbands, like it really affected how a lot of people saw religion or their specific religion. Because now, like, there was some parts of the religion that were being questioned, and, like, was this actually true, or was this a misread, and such as that. And I have all of my special little credits right here. Wowza, take some time to read some of them. They were pretty interesting. And I am going to have this video right here, if you feel free to go right through. It was a few slides back, but it was also a pretty interesting watch too. Helped me a lot on this project. Alrighty. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, wonderful rest of your fall, I guess. Yeah, alright. See you later. Bye-bye.